of everyone sitting here. And it's very simple. Listen to the young people. We have tried in many different ways, and we have failed in most of those ways. Solidarity should exist, but these young people are actually presenting the future to us. And the question I'm going to ask you to think is, what is the responsibility of the churches in supporting the young people who are not afraid, who are not ashamed, who are thinking that a different world is possible? What we are doing in order to bring that work to reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all three of you, for those comments. And I think it's clear now that one of the problems in the United States we're having with addressing the issue of Jerusalem is that we just can't find Pakistan on a map. That's the problem, right? We don't know the difference, right? So, and the comment about the Egypt for Egyptians, having spent a good bit of time there, you reminded me of the Ben Ezra synagogue there in Old Cairo and the long traditions of the Jewish community there, and especially the important Geniza manuscripts that were found predominantly in many languages, but in predominantly Arabic. And Maimonides, of course, the most famous medieval Jewish scholar, wrote his great work in Arabic, right? So the question I want to start out with, we'll do a question here, and then for those of you who do have questions, please fill them out on your card, and we'll take those. The first question that I have is, and this is to follow up on Elias's comments relating to religion in the United States and our perceptions. In the United States, we honor and believe in the separation of individual religious faith and religious political power, inscribed in the Constitution of the Separation Clause. I'm curious, in what ways do those assumptions about the distinction between individual religious faith and religious political power, in what ways is that separation challenged in this case for Americans? I'll open up to all of you.
I think it's challenged basically because we assume it. We never talk about the separation of religious between the separation of religion and state in the United States. We just assume it's a reality. And then we talk about, well, what kind of a reality? Is there a wall? Is there a wall with a bridge over it? Whatever. We don't think about it. We just assume it's working. One of the things that I find interesting is that the actual theoretical work about how faith and religion interact, some of the most interesting theories about faith and government is done by the Ayatollahs in Qum. You know, they sit down and say, well, okay, how does this work? In the United States, we assume it works, and a lot of times assuming it works just means that the loudest voice gets heard. And I think the problem with us in the United States is we need to think a lot more, not just about this, well, freedom of religion or separation of religion and state, but conflict of legitimate rights. You know, when one religion is in conflict, its rights with another, we just don't talk about that. I lived in Germany for 6 years and through several elections, and never heard a politician end up his political speech with "Gott segne Deutschland." Whereas political speeches in the United States end up with "God bless America," almost like "Amen" at the end of a prayer, and then And of course, we know which God we want to bless. And yet we assume that there's this separation. And I think that assumption is the most problematic thing for me.
Santiago?
Yes, most of the time when we ask a question, another one is being veiled. And when we ask about the relation between nation, state, and religion, sometimes we forget to think the problem of the relation between a nation and the state. For a long time, the Western world has been imposing the idea that the state and nation should overlap. That means a state should have only one nation. And this was a model that could have worked for Europe, but didn't work for the rest of the world, but has been exported as the only way in which we can organize ourselves. And as such, I will say that I will ask whether or not the question, especially in Palestine, Israel, is a question about the relation between religion and nation-state, or is the problem of this forced overlapping between the nation and the state? Because the idea of the nation virtually sometimes replaces religion. And the conception that every state should have only one nation is by default an invitation to ethnic cleansing, is an invitation to genocide, and an invitation to restrict your mythical, your founding mythical myth in order to impose a Western conception of political organization as it was the only possibility. The nation-state doesn't have more than 200 years, was formulated no more than 400 years. In most of the countries of Europe, doesn't have more than 130 years. So the question I will ask here is, why we keep insisting in a model that actually has paved the way for ethnic cleansing? So I believe that the problem is not so much the relation between religion and nation-state, but the problem is the relation between the nation and the state.
Just a couple of things there to add to what's already a decision for me, because it really was, okay, this is where I see myself living. And do you want to be, on a green card, was that point, or do you want to become a citizen? It was like, no, I actually do want to become a citizen, not just for the privilege of being able to vote and do those kinds of things, but, this Constitution that you have here actually means something to me. And you get what I'm saying. I'm coming from Canada, very nice, peaceful country. It's not like you're coming from a war-torn country and you're seeking, refuge here. I still have my Canadian citizenship in case things don't work out, always have a backup plan. But that sense of the Constitution is so important. And when you become naturalized, you have to study this. Like you have to take a test, and you have to do all these kinds of things that if you're born here, you don't have to do. And so you look at these kinds of things and say, yeah, that is this amazing thing about this country, about not having a religious test, that you can belong to any religious tradition and hold office. But then you start looking at, well, who has held office and what religious traditions have they belonged to? And then the kinds of things with, I'm thinking now, almost exactly 10 years ago, October of 2008, when you had Colin Powell talking about the sort of things around President Obama, this idea that, he might be a secret Muslim. And you're thinking, okay, where's that come from but the intersection not just of religion, but of race? And one of my great heroes is in the audience, Jim Wallace. And I'm looking forward to his presentation afterwards. And I